Hello and welcome to the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. I am recording this intro on the 13th of July 2023 when I'm delighted to announce that we are sitting at number 3 in the podcast charts in investing in the UK, and actually number 1 in the investing charts in the Philippines. So thank you to those of you listening over there to us as well. So on this session we are talking about business strategy. A bit of a different vibe to this one. As you can see, we're quite conversational on this podcast, but you'll see how me and Dave, as we get into this podcast episode here, how Jackie's passion for the subject of business strategy in property kind of quietens Dave right down. So you'll enjoy seeing how that dynamic works between the two of us. So we're talking about what business strategy means in property and why it's really important, and how that starts to link to how you can be really focused in what your model is, and ultimately bring everything down to taking a systemised approach rather than systemising. This is what you'll probably know us best for in property, so I'm looking forward to packing that all into about the next half an hour or so to share where that's all come from, why it's so dear to my heart, and why I occasionally get on a little bit of a rant about it. So let's do this. Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to this week's episode, which is business strategy.
The joys. This is really like we've got our main 3 pillars of how we've kind of built out our property lifestyle mastery concept, and this is obviously pillar number 1, because without good business strategy you will not have the property business required to give you the mastery of life. So yeah, it's a really important one, I think.
It is. So we're going to just talk about where it's kind of come from, and how the sort of stories behind how we found business strategy, the important people along the way, and how it took us from being really burnt out to ultimately working 24 hours a day to having a holiday every 6 weeks and being able to travel the world with the property business still working for us. So it's a really important episode.
Brilliant.
So maybe
where do we start?
I know. Okay, so let's start with we're up and running in property. We're doing a load of property deals. I am traveling around the country, right? I'm talking at events. Yep. We're buying properties. We're raising finance.
Let's give a year to this.
2015.
15? I think it was
2015.
2015.
And we were doing really well. Like, we agreed a load of deals thanks to raising finance, and we were going hell for leather. But then, the downside of going and speaking at property events is that you, not speaking and just going to property events, is that you start to meet loads of other people who are doing loads of far more exciting stuff than what you're doing. So we're doing like little single lets, a few £100 a month cash flow, making like 20 grand or 30 grand uplift, right, in kind of capital value. And then I'm going to these events and I'm like seeing people who are doing like rent to rent, and they're buying a property, and they're not buying a property, they're like renting a property, renting it out to someone else, making a margin in between, and they're doing it in like 30 days. And I'm like, what? It's taking me like 3 to 4 months to buy these properties, and these guys are doing rent to rent, they're making like £1,000 a month. So I'm like feeding this all back to Dave, who's like, my big supporter at home. I'm like, Dave, we've got to check out this rent to rent thing. Like, 4, 5, 6, 10 months to like get a cash flowing single let. These dudes are like £1,000 a month in 30 days. Let's definitely do that. And you were quite excited about it as well.
Yes.
For your sins now, I think. But then you meet other people, and I'm meeting people who are like title splitting blocks of flats, and I was like, that sounds really good. And we had some investors who we were meeting who we couldn't quite make what they wanted work with our single lets that we were doing, so we were like, okay, let's go and see if we can make title splits work.
To be honest with you, before title splits, wasn't it commercial conversions?
Quite possibly.
I mean, there was a lot of options.
Yeah. Well, when you meet the like cool dude networking event who's like, Jackie, I don't get out of bed for less than £500,000 in a deal, and I'm like, what? Why are we doing this for like 20 grand? So that was, it basically spawned this whole like complete loss of focus, which we'd accidentally been focused, really. Like, it'd been a strategic accident.
Yes.
And then we started seeing all these other strategies. So I started like chasing all these other ideas, feeding it to you. And we went from just being really focused doing single lets to suddenly trying to do everything.
Yeah. Well, also we were still obviously pushing through the single lets as well. So we were still trying to get the refurbs done. We kind of bought one a month suddenly with no systems, no team, no anything in place. But we were there, one property a month for a while because we had the money lined up because we'd gone down the investor route.
Yeah.
And yet still started to getting distracted at this point. We were like, where do we go next? Where do we go next? But you're still working on all of that stuff. So the mind has just gone splintered. It's just completely diffused. There's no laser focus. There's no ability to really keep yourself with clear priority in the brain, and you end up really chaotic.
But the problem is, we were like so excited at that time. We were like, the alarm that would wake us up in the morning at that point, like, and if we hear it now, it's still like, oh, you feel excited inside because you're like excited for life, like all these possibilities that you didn't know were there before, investing in property. It was like really exciting. So this kind of like excited energy just kind of like kept us going. So it kind of, you didn't really realise it happening. But you're so wired, you're suddenly doing 10 times, already you were doing 10 times as much stuff as you were doing before. Then you're trying to do like 5 different property strategies, which I call business models now. And so then you times that by 10 as well. And you don't have the team in place yet. You don't have the systems in place yet.
And we were both working full time.
And we're just that little thing as well, just casually.
A little job on the side.
And I turned up at a networking event and... a really good friend asked me, how are you doing? To which, of course, I just cried. And that was the beginning of burnout for me.
Yes.
I ended up just like totally questioning everything that we were doing in property. I was like, this is ridiculous. We're working so hard. Like the cash flow isn't there yet, but we're working so hard. And I was posting a lot on social media at the time, and really excited, positive stuff. Agreed another deal, 10 deals, like all this was going on social media. And someone who's obviously trodden the path before us was like, oh, okay, she's got the signs of burnout. She's posting at like midnight, which is just come back from a property event, like it's not sustainable. And my post started to get, I think, a little bit less positive. And he reached out, this guy called Elliot Kay, who was our guardian angels basically at that time. And he was like...
He wasn't in property.
No.
He was just a friend of a friend who was watching our journey, who just happened to know what we were about to go through, because that was his area.
So he's like, do you want to go out for a coffee, like have a chat? And I was like, okay. And he was down the road, so we went and had a coffee, and he sat me down and he was like, so like, how's it going? Cue waterworks again. I was like, it's really hard. It's really hard. I wanted to do all of this because we wanted to go on holiday more, but I'm like working all the time, and like I just don't know if I want to do it anymore. That was basically what came out of my mouth. And he was like, I don't know how it all happened, but we basically ended up working with him. He was a business coach, and he was like, you guys haven't got a business plan, basically. And I was like, no, we've got a strategy. Like, I've got 5 strategies. He was like, let's just have a little sit down. So that's when you came in as well, right?
Yes, I think up until that moment I'd just been kind of letting Jackie drive because she's a driver and I'm more of a kind of mop up behind her job. So I've been letting you drive, right? And I kind of, you said, I've gone to work with this guy. It was actually on a grant at the time. It was a government grant to help small businesses like ours to get some help in this area. And you said we should do it together, and I came into these sessions. It was the first time I think we really sat down together and literally were equal business partners trying to work out where this business was going.
Yes, it was a really important moment.
Yeah.
He was like, why are you doing this business? And we were like, we want to go on holiday. Lots. And he was like, cool, how's that going? Like, really badly. I think we'd been on holiday and we'd like worked the whole thing basically in the recent one. So we were like, really badly. And he was like, but what does it mean going on holiday lots? And that was just like such a great question. And we kind of looked like blankly at each other, like, I don't know, like, what do you think? And we were like, what sounds like a crazy amount of holidays? And I was like, I would say like every 6 weeks, that would be like a really great.
Pretty sure we said 4 weeks is too often.
The detailed one, he's got the numbers there.
8 weeks is not enough, so somewhere in between. 6 weeks.
And
sounds good.
I said, you're not having 6.25 weeks, Dave. We're not that detailed. So, we were like holiday every 6 weeks. And he was like, okay, fine. So it was amazing because it just suddenly had such clarity about why we were doing it. And then when we started to look at what we were doing, we realised that so many decisions weren't necessarily leading towards that. So we started using business strategy. So he was using what's a tool called Strategy on a Page, which he had been trained in using by a guy called Derry Llewellyn-Davis. Really great tool. It's like a plan on one page. It's got your vision, it's got your purpose, it's got your market space, what sandbox you're in, it's got your values, and then it's got short, medium, long-term strategy for cross marketing, sales, operations, finance, and people, the different areas. And it was gosh, no one in property was talking about this kind of stuff in this kind of way. It was just you get a strategy, a few strategies to diversify, and then you're good to go, right?
Well, basically, property talked about the high-level concept. You go and buy properties, but this was something talking about the nuts and bolts of how it's all going to work underneath. And it wasn't just the technical detail of how are you, what does the solicitor do, how do you stack up a deal. It wasn't that. That's just understanding your model. This is literally the nuts and bolts of how it's all going to work. How's it all going to fit together? And more importantly, how are you going to end up in a way that you're not just doing it all yourself?
And go on holiday every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So that was the tool that we then started to use. Elliot was amazing in terms of shifting our perspective and bringing us together and connecting us with a bigger vision. And then we subsequently started working with his mentor, Derry, who was he kicked our ass, right? You would sit in front of him in a strategy session, and he would just he's got this piercing stare. Derry, I'll have to tag you into this. This piercing stare, and he'd ask you these deep questions, and you'll basically be like, I don't know. Give a finance example. What would he have asked us about finance?
I just can't remember now. But
how's your cash flow forecast, guys? No, we've got good cash flow from our property deals. We're stacking them all up, and there's X amount of cash flow per month coming in. He's like, that's not a cash flow forecast. You just end up feeling like your tail between your legs, you don't know anything. And he's like, so what? And so
what's your bottom line? Where's your management accounts?
Yeah. What's your profitability?
I don't know.
And Derry was great because he is a business guy, but he had knowledge of property, so he kind of built on what we'd done with Elliot, and he started making us think about it in a property sense, which was really great and starting to be more strategic. And the first thing we did with Derry was we went on one of his retreats.
Yes.
And again, we're using this tool, Strategy on a Page, to plan out what we want to do. We've got a really clear vision now. That's great. We've got really clear values, which was actually a game changer. More on that on another episode. And then it's but okay. He was that every one of these property strategies that you're doing, that's another business plan, right? So we were oh, right. Oh, okay. So that's probably why it's a bit complicated trying to fit it all onto one. It hadn't quite worked. So, okay, fine. We'll have our single lets page, we'll have our HMO page, we'll have our title splits page, we'll have our commercial conversions page. I think we had a developments page.
We did have a developments page, yes.
I think maybe there was a rent to rent one as well. We had everything, guys. We had 5 tables for all of our pages, and we were on this 3-day retreat and trying to simultaneously create all these different plans for all these different strategies.
When you break it down like that, just to clarify, because we were trying to do it on one page and we realised it was just too complex to actually get everything in place, and it's only when you start doing that work and you break it all out that you're frick, these are all so different. It wasn't until we actually start writing the strategy for each element, each one of those strategies.
So with HMOs, the service is slightly different, the tenants are going to be slightly different. You're going to need a different sourcing approach, a different criteria for what those deals are.
Possibly different area.
Yeah.
It was just the nuance of all the tiny details of how your business works was just slightly different. But it meant it was just completely different in the end when you add it all up. Blew my mind.
So, but we didn't realise then. Well, then we were, and it continued to be for many years, hard-working people. We will just push through, work longer hours, and get these pages done, get these plans done. And, Derry was very supportive of that, and he helped us with lots of different ways of moving our business forward, which was amazing. What we have subsequently come to realise I realised the power of bringing business strategy into the property space, because I was looking around at all my peers, people who've been going property for way longer than me, and I was looking at how many nice holidays I was having and comparing it to them, and I was going, okay, we're kind of doing something right here. So I was like, I'm going to have to start bringing this into property. So I worked with Derry, and he helped me to understand like the behind the scenes behind how his page had been developed and used, and I started doing strategy sessions with people in property to create their business plans. And it's been like an amazing journey since then, and we'll have to figure out the best way to put that across now, but like learning how to create a great business plan for property investment companies, and it is very different to other businesses. And I think that for me is something that I feel very proud of, like how we've kind of tested, tried, tweaked, refined, and built upon our learnings from Elliot and Derry, who have been so amazing in our lives, and just kind of made it our own to best serve the people that we have worked with and that we are working with. So how should we go into this next part of it?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that, as with every trailblazer, which we felt like in a way, kind of no one else was doing business strategy in the property space in this way, not anyone we were in contact with anyway. We went the slow route, right? Because we were trying to shoehorn an idea into our own version, having to work out what worked and what didn't as we went. Now, that's fairly normal for strategy, but what did become clear is that the problem with business strategy is that it's very big picture, and you look at everything and you end up with a very clear idea of all the crap you've got to do. It's like a huge amount of stuff, because you're really looking at saying what's the end result, what's the perfect outcome of every part of your business. But you can't do all that at the same time, and we tried to. That was one of our downfalls early on. We were sitting there going, right, here's our big plan, here's all the things we want to do,
here's our team plan for the next 10 years, here's our financial plan, here's all the systems that we've got to set up, and I've got to spend a day a week writing and putting in place more systems, here's how we're going to source more deals, how we're going to find more investors. And it's just like,
yeah, you end up just as busy in some ways. At least you're busy doing really important stuff.
Overall, it is the right stuff, and it does take you to a better place, but there's an easier way than we did it.
There is, yes.
So that's kind of how we did it. We had all these different areas, and let's for now just think about these 5 areas of like, it was marketing, sales, operations, finance, and people were the 5 ones from the page. So we basically put equal emphasis on each. We'd have like a short-term, mid-term, long-term plan. Every pretty much quarter we were sitting down and seeing how we'd got on with our quarterly priorities in each of these areas. And then like every year we were sitting down looking like more of the mid-term, and then the long-term was further down the line. So we had a really good rhythm in place. But this lack of priority about what areas were actually more important was the bit that was not working. Because you are just 2 people trying to run a business, and you cannot do everything all at the same time, and there is some stuff that is much more important than others. In hindsight, now looking back, the biggest 80-20 principle, right? We've realised it should be 20-80 principle, because it's like, what's the 20% that's going to give you the 80%?
Yeah, that's the
so
20-80 principle.
The 20-80 principle, rebranded. So therefore, the easiest win was to just get rid of some pages to start with. Like if you have got 5, even just 3, say, you've got 3 different strategies, you've got 3 different pages, and then you've got therefore 5 different lots of key actions to do in just but 1 quarter. Yeah. It is a lot. So therefore, just get rid of some pages. Just choose 1 page. Doesn't mean you can't do the other pages in the future, but for now, let's just do 1 page.
Yeah.
So that's what we subsequently came to really realise, is that if you're trying to do too much, everything slows down, and ultimately the aim of creating more cash flow just gets slower and harder, or you create more cash flow and you have no time, like you don't get the both of them.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning, was that focus piece, which you all hear me banging on about all the time. Anyway, so focus on 1. And then as we then started to focus on 1, it did work a lot better, but there still was too much splintered focus across these 5 different areas: marketing, sales, operations, finance, people. So we then said, well, subsequently have started to realise that you therefore need to choose which parts of these are important at which phases. So we ended up rebranding them to make it more relevant to property. Like we've subsequently, with Derry's permission, evolved his version of strategy on a page, made property strategy on a page, and just relabeled stuff to make it more sense for our brains and what we're trying to do. So rebranded it into sourcing and acquisitions, so finding and securing properties, funding, which is investors, how you are finding investors and pipelining them and bringing them through into your deals. We went for delivery rather than operations because that just made more sense in my mind. It's kind of like you go out and find the stuff, and then the delivery is how you make sure all that stuff happens. Finance, we renamed financial management to try and differentiate more that it's not about investors, the finance part. That's the funding part. The financial management is your cash flow forecast, which we do know what that is now. We will talk about that on another episode. Your cash flow forecast, your management accounts are looking at the financial strategy for the company. And then people we changed to team because that was just more in alignment with the language of our industry. So we were trying to do all of these things really nicely, but actually then you realise if you don't have any deals, there is no point having a lovely delivery, like loads of lovely systems. And this came to my big learning of this whole like chaos versus order point, right? Okay,
come on, let's hear it.
This is just like Dave's life, like Jackie just going, if you have too much order in your business, i.e. what this would mean is you have got a beautiful property strategy on a page. You've got your vision, you've got your values, you've got a really clear plan for what your service is, you know exactly what your long, mid and short-term strategies are, you review them religiously, you do move all forwards.
And you feel great about it. You feel like
it's
super on top of it.
Organised. But I bet you any money, not doing enough deals. That's the reality of it. Like, if your strategy is too perfect, you're focusing on the wrong things. So that for me is where there are certain parts of strategy that are more important at different times. And if you try and do all of it and make the business strategy really perfect, you won't be doing enough deals to actually move it all forwards. So that's what has then helped us to realise that actually, particularly the stuff around deals and investors, that is the most important place to start, particularly if you're kind of at that place where we were speaking about before, where you're totally burned out, you're doing way too much, feel like you're chasing loads of different deals down and nothing is working. Do not worry about your systems at this point. Please don't go and systemise, because you're going to try and systemise a monster that will never be systemised. So this is where the systemised approach comes in. Do you want to say anything about this? I just feel like I'm bulldozing.
This is the Jackie show, this one. That's okay. I'll watch. I'm not worried.
No, you can talk about it.
No, it's all good. Jackie's on a rant.
Okay, so a systemised approach links back to what we were talking before. You have one business plan, which is for one business model. So therefore, maybe say HMOs. And therefore, you need to make sure that you've got a really clear strategy for how you're going to find these properties and how you're going to fund them. And get that all working first of all, because if you can get that working in a replicable way, the other systems will start to fall along behind.
I guess the whole concept is that a system, the simpler the model, the easier it is to have a system. And so when you're just doing one simple thing, then it's very easy to tell someone else how to do that, right? And it's very easy to write down what it is you're doing. So if all you're having to do is go to a shoe shop and buy an Adidas shoe, and you've chosen you only go to Foot Lockers for that, then you write a process, go to the nearest Foot Locker, buy an Adidas shoe, done. That's your system.
You don't even have to write that process, Dave. At first, you just do it.
Yeah, well, you do it.
You just basically decide, this is how I'm going to do it. I will go to Foot Lockers and I will buy Adidas shoes in size 6, because that fits me and I know that's going to work.
And then you never have to look at any other shoe shops. No other wasting time with other shoe shops. You say, I'm going to go to Foot Lockers. It's fine. So you've saved a load of time there. And you don't have to look at any of the other shoes. You only look at Adidas. Like, the rest of the shoes you're just blind to them. Don't worry about them, because you only buy Adidas. So you've saved a load of time there. And it's just like, suddenly you've got way more time. That's your time for holidays.
Yes, that's true.
And as long as going to Foot Locker and buying Adidas shoes is a good business model, your quid's in. You know? So just make sure that's a good business model, and then the rest of it doesn't matter, because you're going to have loads of time to go on holidays. And we just applied this principle to property.
And also, like, obviously we didn't do this perfectly ourselves first time, right? That this has been trial and error to be able to sit here and talk about this with such clarity. It's been, since 2015. So yeah, best part of 9 years of, taking these ideas from a business setting, trying to implement them, obviously getting massive results even just with those, but then going, how can you get better results? How can you get quicker results? And that's what we've got the joy of doing with the people that we are mentoring and like advising, that they we get to give them a different version of what we do now, knowing what we know. And it always comes back to, right, the business model, what's the criteria, what's the area, like really nail that, really understand how that's going to work with investors. So if you have a clear business model and a clear criteria, you can get right down into the weeds of your deal analysis to understand how it all actually works. Then you can go, okay, so is this actually appealing? Like, okay, this deal is making 2% per annum return. Probably not going to find an investor for that. At the high level, it can look amazing, right? So often you're like, wow, that sounds amazing. But when Mr. Spreadsheet here, when he comes down to actually looking, right, and he's got his epic spreadsheet, when you get right down into the detail, often it doesn't work. Or there are so many different variables for how it can actually work, right? That you can then just figure out what exact combination of variables mean that it will actually work to provide a good return, to make it worth your while and to make it appealing to an investor. So you go from the big picture right down into the weeds, and then after you've gone into the weeds and made sure it actually works from a detail perspective, then you can come back up again and you can go, right, how can I put this forward to investors? What kind of investors are going to want to do this? Be clear about what you're happy with, and therefore I'll make sure it's appealing for someone else to want to do as well. And go forth into raising finance with just that idea. Now, there's obviously loads more layers to raising finance, but if you can just do that one thing as a starting point, not everyone will want to invest with you. Someone will go, well, okay, you're offering 10% returns on 12-month loan agreements, but I want a JV with you. But if you don't want a JV, then you don't have to JV. Just saying that's not what we do, and let that person go. Because the right people are out there for you. You just got to keep going and find them, with the clarity that you know what it is that you actually do.
I was just thinking, this is a really poor example of one of our podcasts.
Well, because it's just me
About
ranting.
Facebook Live, this is going to be what our podcast is like, guys. This is not what it's like normally. This is the Jackie rant.
Maybe everyone's disappointed. Maybe everyone loves listening to me rant.
Yeah. I love it.
Oh, I love you.
Anyway, sorry, that was an aside.
Feedback noted. So bringing this back to then business strategy.
Yes.
Maybe then a question would be, having learned all of this, like looking at our business and looking at what you know now, what have been some of your bigger lessons along the way? Because I'm always the one that's out here kind of like ranting about business strategy, which is probably why I'm off on one, because I'm always talking about it. From your perspective.
Well, I think one of the things you really haven't covered at all is headspace. Because I think one of the things that most people struggle with, and the reason for burnout, is to do with overwhelm. And overwhelm isn't really just because you've got too much on your to-do list. I think every entrepreneur has too much on their to-do list. That's just how it is. If you're a good business owner, you're going to have too much on your to-do list, because growing a business, that's what it requires. However, overwhelm comes because you can't get clarity. It feels like everything is important. It's all there in your headspace all the time, and you keep getting drawn, distracted, pulled between them, and you get to a point where it's like, oh crap, I just can't cope with this, right? And that's burnout. But overwhelm it doesn't have to be that way, even with too much on your to-do list. So for me, business strategy has given that clarity, because then once you get the clarity on exactly what you're doing to grow your business and how it's all working, you can go to the next stage, which took us about 3 to 4 years to work out. But the next stage of how do you prioritize the jobs within your business to understand which ones are truly strategically important at that time, or which ones you can push back. And then you can just see with much more clarity where you should be spending your time and feel comfortable not worrying about the other things. And when you don't worry about them, they leave your headspace. And when they leave your headspace, you start to feel more in control, you feel more calm, you feel more like you understand what the hell you're doing every day in a way that you can see what your action today is doing for growing your business, which means you feel more empowered, you feel better about it. And end result, you're in a much better place to be like positive, to be able to go out there and feel like it's all great. Getting investors over the line is easier because you're in a better space. You're not kind of wired all the time. Like, there's just the knock-on impact of just having that headspace, and clarity giving you the headspace means that everything goes better, and it stops you from going towards burnout.
And then what does this mean from a holiday perspective?
Ooh, holidays.
So the difference of having this kind of behind the scenes stuff in place for the business, what does that mean from like a headspace thing from a holiday perspective?
I guess the discipline is really hard to say, and we all know it. You go to your holiday, you get to the couple of days before your holiday, and you're like, I need to get all this stuff done so I can enjoy my holiday. And invariably, you don't get it all done, and you go on your holiday, and all you have is this massive list in your mind of all the stuff you haven't done, and it weighs on you, and it keeps you feeling like, I haven't finished, and you feel stressed about it. And actually, it takes so long due to that to kind of get to a relaxed stage. The whole point of holiday is to kind of have a chill out and to like reset. But if you can't chill out and reset, it's kind of pointless, isn't it? It's really takes away the whole point of it.
And I guess when you start to put, like, for us, that marker in the sand of like the holidays is the reason that we started doing this in the first place, right? And so therefore, if you're going on holiday and you're not really on holiday, what's really the point of all of this anyway? So it kind of just keeps giving you a really clear perspective for the decisions that you make. And I think so often we say one thing, but then we do something that completely contradicts it. So for example, I hear a lot of people say, I just want 10 grand a month cash flow. But then you really get into what they're actually doing, and they are... okay, let's try and choose an example of this. The most important thing to me is cash flow. Like, I don't have enough cash flow coming in. That's what people say. And then you're like, okay, so like, what's stopping you from getting the next deal secured? Okay, but I don't have the money lined up. Okay, so what are you doing from an investor perspective? Like, are you going out and talking to potential investors? Well, I can't really, because I've had all these leaks on my portfolio, right? And the tenants have really been complaining to me. So I've really got to prioritise getting that done first of all. Or I've got this current refinance going through at the moment. It's just taking up all my time and energy to get that through. So once the refinance has gone through, then I'll go and do the investor stuff that I know that I need to do.
So in other words, they say cash flow is the most important thing, but the truth is...
fixing the leaks and getting the refinance done are actually the most important things.
Dealing with those urgent, what feel like urgent tasks of the portfolio or whatever.
And I think when you sometimes you might have a week that happens and you just get a bit off track. You focus on stuff that really isn't the most important stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. It happens to the best of us. But if you do that week after week after week after week, you look back 1 or 2 years from now and you will be virtually no further forward from where you were. So then it goes, okay, so 10 grand a month is what you're saying is the most important thing. So let's make sure you're doing what truly counts to that. And that really comes down to, and we've had other episodes on this about like prioritising it and being able to make time for stuff, but also from more of the emotional perspective too. It's like sometimes there's something else deep down that is stopping you. And we call it mindset. And I woke up in the middle of the night last night thinking, we shouldn't be calling it mindset. It's something else. Like, it's just, we feel like okay with the word mindset rather than other stuff. But it's an emotional thing. So really... maybe that in that example, that person's not doing the actions to go out and raise finance because actually, deep down, they don't think that they are good enough to raise finance. They don't think the deals that they're doing are actually, people are going to want to invest in them. So therefore, they're finding reasons to not do them because actually it's bringing up...
I'll give another example actually that might be more commonplace, I'd say, in some ways, or more obvious, is if you're prioritising actions like fixing leaks and dealing with the portfolio and dealing with the refinance and dealing with all this, it's usually going to be because you're fearful, you're scared of kind of how you're going to appear to other people, right? So you're so preoccupied with how you're coming across to the tenants, to the world, to everything around you, that is more important to you than moving your business forwards. And I'm not saying neglect your tenants. It's just that it's incredible how people's idea is like it requires 100% of their time, and it doesn't. And that comes back to the 20-80 principle or the 80-20 principle, whichever way you want to say it. Because actually you can do a smaller amount on that and make sure it's fine, but then have enough attention left for the investors. But people don't do it because of the fear, the worry. That's what drives them, the fear of how someone else is going to perceive them. for example.
And this is actually bringing us back really nicely to the overall concept behind this, podcast, Property Lifestyle Mastery, what it's really about. We are just, with business strategy, and we're just talking about, we love a triangle. Us guys, everything comes back to a triangle.
They're nice and simple.
They're nice and simple. So we're talking about business strategy here, which is one triangle, which has also got stuff about investors and deals and systems and
cash
flow. That's all the business strategy part. But what we have found is, and this has been one of the biggest learnings, is business strategy by itself is not enough. That's where this kind of triangle, this top triangle, has become other triangles which actually sit underneath it to make a bigger triangle. On the bottom right hand corner of the other triangle is around mindset, right? Mindset mastery. And on the other side we've got peak productivity, and those things all come together to, in the middle, create property lifestyle mastery. And there is 3 freedoms that have to come together for you to truly have that: financial, emotional, and time.
Yeah.
So just a business strategy by itself is not going to solve all the problems, because you can have a wonderful strategy that is not being implemented. And for why? Could be because you're not managing your time well. That can be the case, but you might know how you're meant to be managing your time, but you're not doing it. So then that comes into more of this mindset side, it's more of the emotional side. What is actually underneath the fact that you're not doing the actions? And self-awareness is the first part of that, starting to become aware of how you feel and realising that you're not a machine, that you are a human being, and we have a lot of flaws, right?
A lot of flaws.
The more self-aware I become, the more I realise I'm totally a flawed mess, but I'm actually wonderful how I am. So we're all these contradictory things going on underneath. So from my example, which you've heard me speak about before, there's the perfectionism, which is linked to the concerns about how other people perceive me, which is linked to my feelings of fear of abandonment, and that isn't totally all subconscious, but that's what's going on underneath all of it. And I think depending on what your exact underlying barriers are, you can get so far. We managed to go, I don't know what we got to, maybe 40, 50 properties without having to look too deeply into the crap that's underneath. But then I think once we got past a certain point, it just became very clear that crap was actually really holding us back. The subconscious conditioning programming was holding you back. And so that's why that's where property lifestyle masteries come from.
Yeah. How do we bring this back to business strategy?
Well, I thought it was good to put it in context.
Oh, yeah, great context. Love it.
So, but bringing it back to business strategy, I think all of that other stuff is seems far less valuable and far less clear and focused without a good business strategy. So I still do think it is the best place to start, because if you're doing way too much and you're not focused, your time's going to be really dispersed and you're not going to be getting good results from it. So let's get the business strategy really focused on particularly the bits that actually matter at that point. So for most of you listening into this, it is going to be around deals and investors. Are you laughing at me again?
No, it's brilliant. Carry on. It's fine.
Deals and investors. And then once that's in place, you go and implement that. And then you start to see where the maybe challenges are around time management, and then we resolve those. And then you get to a certain point that the business strategy is it's kick-ass. You are very clear about how to manage your time, and the stuff that remains is just that makes absolutely no sense. That you know that you want to do it, it makes sense for your goals, but you're not doing it. Then you get to the more emotional stuff. So start with business strategy, because then it really will guide where you need to spend attention on the other side.
Great.
And what would your final thought be on strategy?
Oh gosh, I was so involved in your final
thought. I know everyone can see that. You just sit there and you listen to me in awe. Wow, what a wife!
I guess my final thought would be, it's very big. It's a very big realm, right? Business strategy, and there's loads of books you can read about it and loads of concepts you can use. And obviously you've got high level strategy going down to next levels, and then you get into team strategies, and it's very hard to pick and choose what is going to be right for you at any one time, really hard.
And it really depends on what phase of business you're at. If you're just still a one-man band, you're different if you've got a few team members to if you've got 10 team members. It shifts.
So that's where, for us, the magic happened by having the mentor, right? A business strategy consultant who literally showed us what was next. So that would be my only advice, is don't just go out there and read about it. Go and find someone who you believe in and trust to help guide where you are at. What's the best thing for you? It really gets rid of a lot of, again, because we don't want to be more confused. We're trying to get clarity from this. So there's no point literally going out and then getting even more overwhelmed, because you've got to deal with business strategy as well. It shouldn't be that. It should be something that you put some priority and time into, and then it clears everything up. And that's the process. It's kind of, you keep putting a bit more time into it and it clears up more, and then you put more time and it clears up more. It shouldn't be the other way around, that you put time into it and then you feel even more overwhelmed and confused.
And I think also that how this manifests in property, it is very different, right? And so my final summary points would be: number one, take a systemised approach, don't systemise. Like, get focused on what your business model is first of all, and then bring that into a focused way of doing that, which means you naturally start to systemise your business, so that when you have the cash flow in place and coming through, you can start bringing people to take off bits and pieces from your plate. Try not to use the wonderful post-rationalisation of the fact that diversification is good because it lowers risk. If you diversify what you're doing in terms of your strategies too soon, you actually accelerate risk, because you that's a weird word. Increase risk, because you have too many things on your plate. You can't juggle all of them, and so therefore you're actually far more likely to break and have problems than if you have one that you really understand the ins and outs of it, and you make a strategy to overcome the various risk factors associated with that. I think those for me. Oh yes, and then the final one is just that balance of order and chaos.
Yeah.
So go out there and keep focused and do what Jackie says, and you'll just go far, just like Dave has. Look at him flying.
I just do what Jackie says. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode. We really hope you're enjoying the show so far. If you are, make sure that you are subscribed or following us on whatever your favourite podcast platform is, so that you'll get notified every time we release a new episode. The plan is, moving forwards, now that we are launched, that we'll be releasing a new episode every Friday at around 8 a.m. Also, if you are enjoying the show, we would really appreciate a review. Hop on over and just give us a little star rating, or if you've got a chance to write some feedback as well, we would really, really appreciate it. Next week, we'll be talking about peak productivity and how you make sure that you can achieve business success without working every single hour under the sun. It's a lot easier said than done. So what are some practical hacks and tools that you can use to make sure that you're really efficient with your time? So it's going to be me and Dom talking about peak productivity next Friday from around 8 a.m. So we look forward to zooming in wherever you are in the world and talking about that with you then. Until then, have a great week.